Imagine volunteering to enter the terrifying place on Earth. Europe is in a state because of Nazi power. Millions of people are trapped under Hitler's rule. One man, Witold Pilecki, made a decision that is hard to believe. He willingly entered Auschwitz, a place where millions of people were killed. Witold Pilecki was not a prisoner, he was a spy. The streets of Warsaw were very dangerous. Nazi soldiers would storm into homes in the middle of the night. Take people away. Teachers, doctors, writers and priests were all in danger. Anyone who could resist the Nazi rule would disappear without warning. People were very scared. Did not know what to do. Witold Pilecki was different. He wanted to go to Auschwitz to see what was happening there. There were rumors of torture, executions and starvation. Nobody had proof. So Witold Pilecki decided to enter the camp to build a resistance network from the inside. In September 1940, Witold Pilecki stepped forward during a Nazi roundup in Warsaw. He was taken away by the soldiers and sent to Auschwitz. When he arrived at the camp, he saw that it was a bad place. The prisoners were treated like animals. Were forced to work in very bad conditions. Witold Pilecki became prisoner number 4859. Started to recruit other prisoners to join his resistance network. The prisoners in Auschwitz were treated badly. They were forced to work in cold temperatures, they were starving and they were beaten constantly. The Nazis wanted to break the spirit, but Witold Pilecki and his resistance network were fighting back. They smuggled medicine, shared information. Protected the weaker prisoners. They were also planning for an uprising. It was very difficult. Witold Pilecki knew that surviving was not enough, the world needed to know what was happening in Auschwitz. So he and his network started to send reports to the Allied powers in London. They begged for help. The response never came. The officials did not believe the reports. They thought that attacking Auschwitz was not strategically important. Meanwhile, the death toll in Auschwitz was increasing. Thousands of people were dying every day. The crematorium chimneys were always smoking. The Nazis were also building gas chambers and entire groups of prisoners were disappearing at once. Witold Pilecki witnessed all of this. Was helpless. He could not do anything to stop it. Witold Pilecki did not give up. He kept fighting and planning for an uprising. Finally, the resistance attempted to fight back. It was a failure. The signal came early and the prisoners were not prepared. Most of them were executed, and hope inside Auschwitz nearly died that day. Witold Pilecki realized that no rescue was coming. He needed to escape personally. So he created a plan with his network. They started to prepare for an escape. They copied keys using bread dough, cut phone lines and hid clothes. Every second was planned perfectly because failure meant torture and death. One night, Witold Pilecki and 2 other prisoners escaped from Auschwitz. They moved carefully through the darkness, avoiding the guards and the dogs. They ran across bridges through forests and into the night. After 3 years inside Auschwitz, Witold Pilecki was finally free. After escaping, Witold Pilecki wrote a report about what he saw in Auschwitz. It was one of the horrifying reports in human history, and it described the starvation, executions, gas chambers and mass murder. He begged the resistance leaders to attack Auschwitz, but it was too late. The war eventually. Nazi Germany collapsed. Auschwitz was liberated. Witold Pilecki's suffering was not over. He joined the resistance again, this time against the communists. He gathered intelligence, secretly used identities and moved constantly. Eventually he was betrayed and arrested by the communist authorities. He was tortured, brutally interrogated for months and accused of espionage and treason. The trial was fake. The outcome was already decided. In 1948, Witold Pilecki was executed with a bullet to the head. His story did not end there. Years later, his reports. The world finally learned the truth. A man willingly entered Auschwitz, built a resistance, inside hell itself, and risked everything to warn humanity. His grave was never found. His courage became immortal. Because sometimes the greatest heroes are not the ones who survive, they are the ones who willingly walk into darkness so the world can see the truth. The sound of birds. The smell of forests. The silence of nature. It all felt impossible. Witold and the other escapees hid deep inside the woods for days. Every sound felt dangerous. Every shadow looked like death. Because if the Nazis found them, execution would be immediate. But Witold's mind was no longer focused on survival. He carried something far more dangerous than weapons. The truth. Hidden inside safe houses. Witold began writing. Page after page. Detail after detail. He described starvation so severe prisoners fought over crumbs. He described prisoners beaten to death for walking too slowly. He described smoke pouring endlessly from crematorium chimneys. And then, the gas chambers. Entire families murdered within minutes. Children. Women. Old men. Thousands every single day. This became one of the first eyewitness reports from inside Auschwitz. A warning to the world. But once again, the world hesitated. Nazi Germany accelerated the Holocaust. Trains arrived non-stop at Auschwitz. From Hungary, France, Poland, Belgium, Greece. Across occupied Europe. Inside the cattle wagons. People believed they were being relocated. Most carried suitcases. Family photographs. Food. Blankets. Hope. But Auschwitz was never meant for relocation. It was built for extermination. The platform became the dividing line between life and death. One direction meant forced labor. The other. Immediate execution. The Nazis transformed murder into a system. Efficient. Organized. Mechanical. Victims were marched into fake shower rooms. Told to remain calm. Told they would receive food afterward. Then the doors locked. Zyklon B pellets dropped from above. Within minutes. Silence. The bodies were removed. Gold teeth extracted. Hair collected. Clothing sorted. And the next group arrived. Auschwitz became a factory of death. One that operated day and night. Even after escaping, Witold never stopped resisting. He met with Polish underground leaders. He urged them again and again to attack Auschwitz. He believed prisoners inside could rise up if given support. Weapons. Air strikes. Anything. But military leaders feared failure. The camp was too large. Too heavily guarded. Too dangerous. And while leaders debated strategy, thousands kept dying. Every single day. Meanwhile, the war itself began changing. Germany started losing major battles. The Soviet Union pushed westward. Allied bombers filled European skies. For the first time, Nazi defeat seemed possible. But Auschwitz continued operating almost normally. Even as the Third Reich weakened, the killings accelerated. The Nazis knew the war might be lost. So they rushed to erase as many lives as possible before the end. The sound of distant artillery grew louder. German officers became nervous. Documents were burned. Evidence destroyed. Mass graves hidden. But prisoners inside Auschwitz already sensed something changing. The Nazis looked afraid. For years, the prisoners had feared the guards. Now, the guards feared the future. Still, the killings continued. Even at the edge of collapse, the machinery of death refused to stop. As Soviet forces approached, the Nazis evacuated thousands of prisoners. Weak, starving, frozen, they were forced to march across snow-covered roads for miles. Anyone unable to continue was shot immediately. Bodies covered the roadsides. The death marches became Auschwitz's final act of cruelty. A final attempt to hide evidence from the advancing Allies. January 1945. Soviet soldiers finally entered Auschwitz. What they discovered shocked even hardened veterans. Mountains of shoes. Children's clothing. Suitcases. Human hair. Ash. And survivors barely alive. Walking skeletons staring silently at the liberators. More than 1 million people had been murdered there. Most of them Jewish. The world could no longer deny the truth. The horror was real. And far worse than anyone imagined. After the war, photos and films from Auschwitz spread worldwide. People struggled to understand how humans could commit such evil. Trials began. Nazi officers claimed they were following orders. But survivors told the real story. A story of cruelty beyond imagination. And among those testimonies, Witold Pilecki's reports became some of the most important documents ever written about Auschwitz. Because he had seen it from the inside. From the very beginning. But Poland's suffering wasn't over. After Nazi Germany collapsed, the Soviet Union tightened control over Eastern Europe. Communist authorities took power in Poland. And former resistance fighters became targets. Witold watched his country fall under another dictatorship. So once again, he joined the underground. Once again, he risked everything for freedom. The communist secret police searched relentlessly for opposition members. Arrests happened at night. Disappearances returned. Fear returned. And eventually, they found Witold. He was captured in 1947. Interrogated brutally. Beaten repeatedly. Tortured for information. Friends later said. The suffering he experienced under communist imprisonment was worse than Auschwitz itself. The trial was never about justice. The verdict had already been decided. Witold was accused of espionage. Illegal weapons possession. Working for foreign powers. The courtroom became political theater. But even broken physically, he refused to betray his ideals. Witnesses later remembered his calmness. His dignity. His silence. May 1948. Inside a communist prison. Witold Pilecki was led to his death. No public funeral. No honor. No recognition. A single gunshot ended the life of one of history's bravest men. His burial location remains unknown to this day. The communist regime tried to erase him completely. And for decades, it almost worked. For years, speaking about Witold Pilecki was dangerous in communist Poland. His reports were hidden. His name disappeared from textbooks. But truth cannot stay buried forever. After the fall of communism, historians uncovered his story again. The world finally learned about the man who volunteered for Auschwitz. The man who built resistance inside hell. The man who warned humanity while the world looked away. Today, Witold Pilecki is remembered as one of the greatest resistance heroes of World War II. Schools teach his story. Books document his mission. Memorials honor his sacrifice. But perhaps his greatest legacy is this. Even in humanity's darkest moment, one man still chose courage over fear. Hope over surrender. Truth over silence. Auschwitz was designed to destroy humanity. To erase compassion. To replace hope with terror. But inside that darkness, people still resisted. People still helped one another survive. And one man willingly entered the nightmare. So the world would one day know the truth. His name was Witold Pilecki. And his story remains one of the most unbelievable acts of bravery in human history.